Digital fundraising is so much more than just posting requests for charitable gifts. Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the fundraising school, and I'm joined today by Jeff Spitko. Jeff is a senior director at the San Diego Foundation, a community foundation in San Diego County, where, thanks to the foundation, the fundraising school hosts our classes 3 to 5 times a year, usually in the late fall through the early spring, and of course in the middle of the winter. And Jeff, thanks so much for being with us here on the Fundraising School's First Day podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here, Bill.
In addition to all the things the San Diego Foundation does, including hosting the fundraising school, they also host one of the premier fundraising conferences every September. Hope you have a chance to go sometime. And that's where I saw Jeff sharing his expertise on digital fundraising. And Jeff, before diving into some of the details, I know as I teach for the fundraising school, I think some nonprofits just have this notion, I just need to make the ask online, go on Facebook, go on Instagram, send out my email. And if I just make the ask, that's all I need to do. But digital fundraising is so much more than that. Can you kind of start at that top level and help our audience understand just all the intricacies involved in digital fundraising?
Definitely. And the way I think about it is, just as with major donors, you're trying to build a relationship with a specific individual. When I think about annual giving and digital fundraising, you're essentially doing the same. You are trying to build a relationship, but the whole key is scalability. And how can you do that through personalization, customization, and begin to get those communications out there that are going to build that relationship with your donors? And I think of it as almost a holistic journey. A lot of times I see when I'm added to nonprofit fundraising lists, within a day, I'm getting notifications asking me for funds or a direct solicitation. And it's way too soon in the process. So what we always say is think of it as a slow journey of cultivation and really a moves management process, just like you would with a traditional major gift donor. But we start it with social. And so, how are you getting your social media messages out there? How are you getting them to say, this is an organization I want to learn more. Maybe I'll start following them. And then how can we convert you from a social follower to actually collect your email? And then once we do get that email, how can we do a slow cultivation process where you can begin to understand our mission, understand our work, see a little bit of impact, and have that all done way before you ask for a solicitation. I think the worst thing you can do when you get a new donor email is get out there and right away just start asking for money.
A long time social journey that deepens the relationship with your audience and then with your donors over time, not just a simple quick hit, making the ask. And Jeff, one of the things I saw you teach so expertly, by the way, was this whole notion of lead generation. People always say, if I can just get folks in, I know I can build those relationships, but how do I get started? We hear that question all the time. What advice do you have in terms of lead generation, in terms of social media and digital fundraising?
Definitely. Yeah, I think of lead generation as that step in between your marketing and your fundraising department. It's sort of where integrated fundraising lies. And when we use the term lead generation, it's used often with donor acquisition. How are you bringing new folks in as prospects and beginning to cultivate them? So when I think of your traditional lead generation process, there's lots that go into it. I mean, you can be growing those leads organically, and a lot of that can come through either organic social posts or paid social posts, and ways in which you can then begin to collect their email addresses and then really start them through a welcome series. I think when you get a new email address, the first thing you want to do is acknowledge, hey, thank you for signing up for our list. This is what you're going to be receiving in the future. And then starting to pepper them with information, not the next day, but over a course of maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks, where they're learning a little bit more about you. And there's different ways in order to get to that point where you're getting their email address. When I think about lead generation, you have to think, what can I put out in market that is going to inspire someone to want to learn more about our organization? How are we connecting with them? So that can be done through a lot of different ways. I find a lot of organizations use advocacy. So can you create petitions that are tying in what your mission is and why someone would be interested in joining it? I'll give you an example. I spent, prior to working at San Diego Foundation, I was with the San Diego Zoo for 11 years. And we would do petitions around the Endangered Species Act and just putting them in market through advertising, through social posts about hey, we feel that the Endangered Species Act should be protected more. Do you feel the same way? And individuals would go on and they would sign that petition, and then they would begin to learn more about our organization. The other thing I see a lot is quizzes. I think there's what part of the brain are you triggering with individuals who could be potentially interested in your mission? Is it sort of that social impact piece where they want to sign on to a petition to do advocacy? But there's a lot of more fun and engaging ways for them to learn about your mission. I think, again, about time at the San Diego Zoo, we would put quizzes in market, quizzes that would say, where you would go through a series of questions and it would talk to you about what endangered species you were most similar to. Or it could be a little bit more serious and less on the fun side and test your knowledge about endangered species. Did you know this about the giant panda? Did you know this about the California condor? And really begin to see what's working. And I think just like with lead generation, just like with annual giving and any direct marketing campaign, it's all about testing. And so what are you putting in market that you're seeing is working? That the thing I love about digital fundraising is you'll learn a lot quickly and you can pivot quickly. I think the worst thing you could do is continue to put a campaign in market, see it's not working, and just give it too much time. I think you should be learning from every day you have a campaign live. You can see things like open rate, conversion rate. It's easy to get an understanding of what's working and not working with different audiences. And so even with lead generation tactics, you can try different types of petitions. You can try different types of quizzes. You can try premiums. We call them lead magnets in a lot of cases. So we saw this a lot way back in presidential elections back to 2008, where people would start giving small, we would call them premiums, in order to collect an email address. So inspiring them with, hey, if you give us your email address, you'll get this sticker or you'll be entered in a raffle. Again, it's all trying to figure out engaging marketing methods that will do a couple things. Get out more information about who your mission is and why it's important to the individuals that are receiving that message. And really a simple invitation for them to learn more. And then once they do, again, you can work them through that welcome series that we talked about where, it's kind of like dating. You're not going to go out on your first date and ask them to marry you. You want to have a slow trajectory where you're learning about each other, where you're trying to see if this is a fit. And you're doing that with the donor's doing that with you to see if this is an organization that I want to invest in. And there typically is, a pretty substantial period between the time you start lead generation and the time that you actually are going to see results. The thing with donor acquisition and lead generation, a lot of chief financial officers hate the word because it is probably not going to be net positive in terms of revenue in year one, potentially even year two. Most organizations lose money on acquisition, which is not something that many of them want to hear. But again, you have to think, what's the long-term value of those donors that are coming in? And it's not about, pushing out emails right away to try to bring in money. It's about trying to build long-term sustainable relationships. And you can't do that if they don't understand who you are as an organization, the impact that you're making. And so I would say there's a lot of patience involved, which some organizations that I've talked to or consulted with don't want to wait. They want to kind of take in those emails, get it out right away, see dollars come in the door. That's not the way it works. It is definitely a slower trajectory, and it's critical to realize that going in. It's an important investment in the future of your organization, but it is going to take some time before you see the results come in. Just like traditional annual giving, I think most people say that when you start an annual giving program, you should expect 3 to 4 years before you start to see consistent recurring revenue come in. In some cases, great. If you can speed up that timeline, everybody would love to do that quicker. But I think it's all about setting the expectations going in. And with lead generation specifically, you can't go into it with the mindset of, oh, we're going to put some Facebook ads up. We're going to put a petition in market. All these new names are going to come in. And all of a sudden, our revenue is going to go through the roof. It's a slow process. And I think everyone needs to be prepared for that as they step into that venture.
Jeff, there's so much sophistication in your answer that reveals at least two things. Number one, your considerable expertise. Second of all, that this is not just add water. This is not insta fundraising. And I do think, as I mentioned at the outset, there is that myth out there that we kind of have this microwave oven mindset or the remote control press one button mindset around digital fundraising. And in all of those examples you gave, it really does point to the need to think about this long term and build those long term relationships, which the research shows are the best relationships that we have in fundraising. I need to ask you, you talked about, advocacy, get the petition out. You talked about quizzes, things like that. What about engagement? What practices have you seen where I'm getting my expertise out while I'm talking about my nonprofit organization? And I find basically intriguing, engaging ways to ask folks in social, what do you think? And so that they're responding back. What have you seen in that regard that's worked?
Yeah, and I think you bring up an important point. I think in a lot of cases, when we do direct marketing, we forget that we're trying to build a two-way relationship. And we are really good. Here's what I found over the years of working in nonprofit fundraising. We're really good about talking about our mission. We are really good about asking a lot. I think where we fall a little bit is reporting back on the impact. I think sometimes the stewardship and the thank you process I'm finding with most organizations could be a lot better. I feel even when I do it, I always feel like I'm under stewarding the donors that I work with. And I think it's because you're so busy in getting messaging out, getting asks out, managing the gift in the initial part of the thank you when you first receive it, but thinking about, again, building that relationship. And I think the thing that we forget so often is one, it's a two-way street. We need to be learning about them. And I think there's two ways that I typically go about that. Obviously, surveys are a great mechanism. We want to be learning as much as we can about our donors because I think, one, it's often difficult to get them to respond, but when they do, what they tell you is gold. And it's important not only to be taking it in and to be asking, but to be leveraging what you're learning. And then the other thing I find, even when I take surveys and I get frustrated that I don't feel like the results I put in have made an impact anywhere, it's going back in front of your donors and letting them know, thank you so much for doing this. We appreciate you taking the time. Here's what we learned from many of you, and here's what we're putting into action as a result of it. I think there's nothing worse than taking time to do something and feeling like it was a complete waste of your time. And I think, again, in building that relationship, how can you be, it's like when you go, have you ever gone out to dinner with someone and realize I have been here for an hour and a half and I have not gotten two words in? They haven't asked me one question about myself. That's the same way with donors. Like it can't be this sort of this relationship where we're just putting out information. The other thing I would say is, in addition to specifically asking them, which is great, that's great information, we should be learning from what they're responding to. That's part of why I love direct marketing. There's the creative side, but there's the data analytics side. And when you're testing, you get a better impression of your donors and understanding like this content worked with them. This resonated. These subject lines worked with them. We saw the open rate change. We saw when we put this email out with this content, there was more conversions on it. It's constantly learning who they are and what makes sense. And then trying to figure out as they come in, because when you're doing lead generation, often you're trying to put two different types of content out there. There's content for prospects who haven't given to you yet, and there's content for individuals who are part of your family already, who have already given to your organization. As you build that relationship, you should be deepening not only that relationship with the donor, but also deepening your segmentation. And so thinking about, we've seen these individuals come in, here's what they're responding to. Maybe they can go in this particular bucket and we can serve them up more relevant information to what they need. I'll give you an example, again, from my time working at San Diego Zoo. We had individuals who gave to the organization who were passionate about building things. So if there was a new construction project, a new habitat that was being built, they were really excited about that. Then we had other individuals who didn't necessarily want their donation dollars to go towards a facility. They were more interested in taking part in our conservation work that was happening across the globe. And really, those are individuals who may have given to other conservation organizations, but were intrigued and excited about the conservation work that we as an organization did across the planet and wanted to invest in that. So you have to be really careful because those are very two distinct personalities in terms of what they're excited to give to. So the worst thing we could have done was taken donors that we specifically know don't want to give to building projects, they want to give to international conservation, but then say, oh, well, it's one list. So these individuals, even though we know this about them, we're going to serve them up new information about a habitat that we're building at the zoo. So people want to know, especially in the age of digital saturation, that you see them, that you hear them, that you understand their nuances. Otherwise, when they receive your emails in their inbox or when they look at your social media, you're just one of the thousands of other nonprofits that's probably trying to get things in front of them. And you constantly have to think about, how are we different? How are we distinguishing ourselves from other organizations? How are we distinguishing ourselves by seeing the donor? And I think you can choose so many things with organizational messaging. You can tweak that positioning as much as you can. Nothing is ever going to work better than if you can get in front of a donor and show them that you see them. And it's gone way beyond the, 15, 16 years ago when I sort of got into this of, oh, can we put their name in a subject line? It's gone well beyond personalization. It needs to be really targeted, personalized content that is specific to them. It's a little harder to do really early in the cycle. You can't do that really with your social media, but once you get their email, you should constantly be learning about who they are and really treating them in a manner of the content that you think is going to work best.
Jeff, I've noticed with all of these wonderful examples that you're telling us, I often hear, and therefore you get their email address. And that's how you get their email address. And you want to be able to acquire their email address. I don't think I need to have expertise in qualitative research to discern that getting the email address is maybe that first step in lead acquisition that leads to the long-term donor journey. Can you say a little bit more about that? Am I picking up on that right? That's
Yeah.
maybe one of those good first measurables of how many new email addresses I'm obtaining, even before I'm looking at number of gifts and dollars raised?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the area that we're talking about with lead generation, it's so interesting because it really lives at the intersection of marketing and fundraising. And they kind of have two different aspects to them. You think about your traditional marketing funnel. You go from awareness to engagement to conversion. When you talk marketing, you're always trying to drive them down. Then when you switch over to development, it's all about the donor pyramid. And we sort of start with this base of your prospects, your one-time gift donors, your annual donors, your mid-level donors, and then you work your way up to the pyramid. I always laugh, when people say annual giving is the base of the donor pyramid. I'm like, sure, but that pyramid has one insanely large basement. And that basement is really all the marketing that goes into it. And when I think, because there's so much more that goes into the process before you start getting the names and you start soliciting them. And so you bring up a good point. It's about getting the email address, and there's lots of different ways to go about that. And it comes through, when I think about social really is a way to get out your broad-based awareness. But then once you're trying to get email addresses, I think there's lots of different ways. It's just like media. You have paid, earned, and owned. And you can certainly go out and buy paid list purchases. The way I think about names and email addresses, you think about first party data, second party data, and third party data. First party data are the ones that are already in your system. They came to you. They wanted to learn more information, and now they're in your database. There is, and then we'll go the other side of it to third party data, which is straight up list buying, which in some cases, if you're buying targeted lists that are really specific, close to your mission, as long as that follows the process of making sure you're doing it in the right way, that can work, but they're not going to be as qualified of leads because you've purchased those names, they don't know you. So ideally, if you can sort of earn them either through media you're putting in market or other things that you're putting that are driving them to you. That's the ideal scenario. There's lots of ways to acquire the email address, but I think at the end of the day, there's just no easy way once you get it to get from there to the solicitation without making sure it's sort of a slower roll to really understanding them and them understanding you.
There's a wonderful parallel here. At the fundraising school, we teach that fundraising is a 14-step process, and making the ask doesn't happen until step 13, that there's 12 steps of preparation and planning and relationship identifying and relationship building before we make the ask. And to Jeff's important point earlier, step 14 is stewardship, which we can never leave out. We have a specific class just on that topic as well. Well, when Jeff teaches about donor journey through digital means, receiving the gift is step number 5. You're asking people to consume your content, then they follow you on social media. Third is they take other actions that don't involve a financial gift, maybe forwarding your information, advocating for you, all the things that Jeff has been talking about. Number 4 is you get their email address. Number 5 is you receive the gift. And Jeff, just as we wrap up here, again, I just love how you spell that out, showing that this is a long-term journey. There are no quick fixes with digital fundraising, and fundraisers need to know that and be able to lead up to their CEOs and their board members as well.
Definitely.
Jeff Spitko is Senior Director at the San Diego Foundation. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Bill. Appreciate it.
And again, their facility at Liberty Station in San Diego is just absolutely glorious. And we are thrilled to be able to teach our public courses there 3 to 5 times a year, oftentimes in the winter months, if you're looking to get away from cold temperatures in your part of the world. And those are part of our 27 public courses that we offer in any one of 10 cities in the continental United States, leading to 5 different certificates. We also have quarterly webinars. We have weekly podcasts. We can also bring custom training right to your nonprofit or your association or your region. And all this information is available online at go.iu.edu/TFRS for the Fundraising School. Grateful for our producers today, Mike Anthony and Jennifer Boffman. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are more fully informed on this first day from the Fundraising School.